Sarah. Matches with your thingy presentation.
So this is Chapter 12, Section 2, Committees in Congress. Division of labor. Both the House of Representatives and the Senate rely on a form of division of labor. Congress as a whole can be described as a group of multiple committees that join together periodically to track and approve of each other's actions. So the division of labor comes in why we have committees, because as a whole, Congress can't, control everything that happens. So when they divide up what they're dealing with, where the bills are going, it's both houses come into play. So there's a lot of different committees that deal with all the issues.
Is there any particular reason that you included those, the different emblems or seals for the houses? Was there anything notably different about them, or?
Not really.
They're different color tones in the middle.
Yeah.
I think the one has stars, one has stars and one
It
doesn't.
has little dots.
Yeah, the one has the stars on them.
They made it look like more prestigious.
I like these games.
Makes it stand out more.
Well, I
Probably looks higher in class.
Mr. Richardson is tanner on the bottom. It has a little white square outside. I'm getting your
His wings are more.
Is there anything in your book about that, Daniel?
No, I don't want to. Maybe, but I don't want to look at it. Tripping.
Committee assignments. Committees were created in order to distribute fair consideration of each bill as it was introduced. Standing committees are permanent panels in which all similar bills can be sent. Each House committee has from 10 to 75 members, and each Senate committee has from 14 to 28 members.
Why is there such great variability in terms of the number of members on each of those respective houses?
Same reason why there's more people in the House of Representatives than this in the Senate. Because it has to include more people, so more people have to be involved to establish, to speak out for more people, so it's not just a single group that's kind of benefiting. It's two.
Son is never going to council.
Representatives are assigned to 1 to 2 standing committees. Senators are assigned to 3 to 4. These committees handle bills dealing with particular policy matters such as Veterans Affairs. 3 standing committees that do not act as subject matters bodies. In the House of Rules of Committee and the Committee Standards on Official Conduct. In the Senate, the Committee on Rules and Administration. Most bills receive their most thorough backing and consideration through these committees, in which relates to the appropriate standing committee. They receive diverse point of views in receiving opinions and concerns from members of both houses.
Matthew, or either of your partners there, would you mind describing the differences between these two houses in terms of how bills are introduced, how they're assigned to committees, or is it pretty much the same in both houses? That was part of my question.
Is it people? No? Okay.
Well, I know that the bills go to each, whatever bill relates goes to each separate committee.
So how do they decide? How is that decision made? Like, okay, Joey introduced a bill about chocolate milk being introduced in every drinking fountain at every school across America. How would you know where to send that bill to which of the standing committees? How would you know? Who would do that?
Well, it also depends on whether it's a permanent or a temporary.
True, that's true, but who, and ultimately still comes back to that same question, who would make that decision?
Isn't it to the Senate brings it out to the rest of the people? So that's
But that's 100 people. How
But who in there makes
Would it be the rules of the school?
For which body?
For the House?
It's the Rules Committee, right?
And
And let's be a little more specific. Who calls the shots in the Rules Committee for the House of
The
Representatives?
majority party?
Yes, more specifically, who?
The chairman?
The Speaker of the House?
The Speaker of the House. Whereas in the Senate, you already put it up here, they do things a little bit differently. In the House, it's kind of, I hate to say this because we're a democratic nation, but it's much more totalitarian in the House of Representatives. The way the House of Representatives has evolved over time, the Speaker of the House wields enormous influence.
Yeah.
Enormous. Whereas it's a little bit different in the Senate because you have 100 members, and yes, the majority leader, most recently, the past 8 to 10 years, has been Harry Reid. Harry Reid is very influential, but he doesn't have the same level of power in his body that the Speaker of the House has in his body.
So the rules, it's called the Rules Committee, right?
Mhm.
So
In the House.
In the House, yes, in the House. But the Rules Committee, like, it says, like, which, like, bill goes to which committee?
Exactly. So
Is that all he did?
let's say, Daniela, you were the Speaker of the House, and you saw Joey's bill come up regarding the chocolate milk and the drinking fountains. Well, I'm just using something crazy. Hopefully, it'll help you remember it. So Daniela looks at that bill and she says she's a thoughtful, very responsible, logical individual, and she says, chocolate milk, schools. Well, chocolate milk, that has to do with agriculture, ranching, so I better send it to the Agricultural Committee. Schools, I better send it to the Education Committee. Are there some others? Perhaps. Now, maybe, I'm not saying that this would ever happen in politics, but maybe Daniela doesn't particularly care for Joey's political outlook. And she says to herself, that little turkey, I'll show him as Speaker of the House and as the one who controls the Rules Committee. I'm going to send it down to my good friend Raul, who is in charge of the Foreign Relations Committee. And with a wink, wink, and a nod, nod, sends the bill down there, and Raul says, I got your wink, wink, and nod, nod. I'll be sitting on this bill. And that bill's going where?
Down the drain. Like that chocolate milk.
Ooh, good fun.
Oh, nice.
And the different panels. Members try to win assignment to more prominent panels. Leading committees in the House are Rules, Ways, Means, Appropriations, Armed Services, Judiciary, International Relations, and Agriculture. Leading committees in the Senate: Foreign Relations, Appropriations, Finance, Judiciary, Armed Services, Banking, Housing, and Urban Affairs.
Now, Octavio, this begs the question, what do you mean by leading committees?
Like those are the most popular, like most sought after
Sought after by whom?
by
House of Representatives.
By policymakers?
the members.
By the members themselves?
Yeah.
Why would they be wanting to serve on those particular committees that you listed there?
Because
They get the most important bills.
Ooh, perhaps. And if you're on the committee that helps determine the fate of influential bills, what does that mean for you as an elected official?
You're
More
Freemason.
for you.
Okay, maybe more notoriety, hopefully more people would know you. And
More power to you.
more
Freemason.
power how?
More credit.
And with
Voting.
in your say or your voice on how you feel in that topic, as if you were in a less popular committee, your opinion wouldn't really matter on the important topics.
So, Serge, you have absolutely nothing to do with, you really don't have a dog in the fight as far as chocolate milk and the drinking fountains at these schools, right? But your buddy Joey over here, he's looking to you because you're on the Agricultural Committee, or on the Appropriations Committee, the people who decide where the money goes. And he says, Serge, if you can help me out on this one, I know you're interested in whatever. I got your back when it comes, right?
Yeah.
So,
Joey.
Minus 2 points.
And then the chairman of each committee is chosen by seniority, role, more experience, and knowledge. Members of each standing committee are formally elected by floor vote at the beginning of each term. Each party already has their own committee roster, but the votes stand as ratification of the party's choices.
I think all that's saying there is that, yes, there was nothing in the Constitution about Democrats, Republicans, Federalists, Anti-Federalists, Whigs, Populists, but the nature of the beast is that what? You're not getting elected there more than likely unless you belong to nowadays, the Republican or the Democrat. So, yes, those seats are supposed to be assigned by voting in these houses, but we all know
Realistically, they already have
it because what? They belong to one of those two
parties.
Yeah.
Subcommittees. So this goes back to the division of labor as well, because within the committees they have certain subcommittees. So they're responsive for a particular part of the committee as a whole. And an example of this is the Committee on Armed Services. It does much of its work in smaller committees to focus on the different aspects of the committee altogether. So like the defensive aspects, or like what they're thinking about doing, how armed services, things that are contributing towards it. So a lot of the committees just break into smaller groups, so that way every little aspect of it can be taken into account.
So you're saying that because, for instance, defense occupies a large piece of our budget and affects so many people in so many places, they really want to make sure that they're fully informed on the
There's
issue.
full coverage of it, so it's not just one group of people looking at it, it's several smaller groups of people contributing to that whole.
You know, you brought up, I want to bring up one that just ripped it from the headlines right here. How many of you have heard of the A-10 Warthog, also known as the Thunderbolt?
The car? The plane?
The plane. What do you know about the A-10, Ramon?
It was designed to
Did it get lost?
Well, they're talking about discontinuing production and support of the A-10 Warthog. It's known as the tank killer plane. It's a strange looking plane that's basically it's built around this rotating Gatling gun, and it's a wall of lead that's just screaming out of it. And it mows right through tanks. They use these in Desert Storm. When we went in to get Saddam Hussein, they used them also in when we went into Iraq and Afghanistan. They call this thing in. It's not very fast, but it can carry several missiles, and that gun just lights it up. But now they're saying it's outlived its usefulness. But it's been such a big part of the budget, and a lot of bases have depended on all the money that goes into the support of this. But if they discontinue the production and support of the A-10 Warthog, what's it going to do to those bases that are set up to maintain and handle those A-10?
make it weaker.
Oh yeah, what happened to Outwater when Castle Air Force Base got shut down?
Came haunted.
Yeah, what happened to this community?
People
It
moved
was
away.
like weakened and stuff.
Oh, the economy just went. That was all those federal dollars gone. And now they're talking about discontinuing the A-10. Have there been big discussions in the subcommittees and committees in the armed services? Yep, that's the A-10.
A ver al cine pagar la entrada.
What?
It's father, the father or grandfather of the A-10 fought in World War II as the P-47 Thunderbolt. It was the largest fighter bomber in World War II, and it accounted for more ace kills in World War II than even the P-51 Mustang. It's got quite a storied career.
You and those big words.
Was that?
The House Rules Committee. Traffic cop in the lower house. So many regulations and measures are introduced into the House, there is a screening process. Before a bill can reach the floor of the House or be considered to reach it, they must be cleared by the rules of committee. The committee decides whether and under what conditions the full House will consider a measure. In the Senate, the process is not so regulated. The majority floor leader controls the appearance of bills on the floor.
In other words, if you're not in the good graces of the Speaker of the House, you can kiss your bill what?
Goodbye.
Aw, it makes me not want to be a politic no more.
Select committees, sometimes called special committees, are set for a specific purpose and a limited time. Speaker of the House and President of the Senate appoints members. They are formed to investigate current matters and help determine the need for new laws, as well as gauge the adequacy of those already in action. Also oversees the federal agencies are following these laws. The Senate Special Committee focuses on those of aging. Focuses on conduct and actions of the elderly in order to bring more public attention to problems facing older Americans.
Can you give me an example, and I guess you could refer to your textbook, but hopefully you did a little research nowadays on when some of these select committees have been established in the House to address what specific types of issues?
Watergate scandal.
Okay, Watergate, yeah. Yeah, the Whitewater, the Clintons, they were involved in a big old scandal in Arkansas where supposedly they got a hold of some land and sold it for money that was illegal or whatever. What about Bill Clinton with Monica Lewinsky and perjury and obstruction of justice and all that? How about after 9/11?
Yeah, the domestic terrorism.
What was the one called?
True.
With Iran, it was like one country Iran and another one we were supposed to do an arms.
The Iran-Contra.
Yeah, they
We're going to talk about that.
Don't get me, dude. I have to get that too.
Senate Select Committee on Presidential Campaign Activities. This is more well known as the Watergate Committee. So, is everybody familiar with the Watergate scandal?
What is it about?
Like I know.
Ask them. They're
What was the one?
The Watergate scandal was it was a robbery in the Watergate building, and it had a lot of connection to President Nixon's re-election. And so they had been caught while attempt to wiretap phones and steal secret documents. They're not sure whether Nixon knew about the Watergate scandal beforehand, but it did have connection to his re-election, which is why he had resigned.
Well, the reason he ultimately resigned was because these guys, and we'll never know whether he had direct knowledge of those guys who busted in, because the Democratic National Committee headquarters was located in the Watergate building in Washington, D.C., and a couple of guys busted in there. They were looking around, which is so dumb because at that time, the Republicans had an overwhelming majority in both the executive and legislative branch. But for some reason, they felt the need to go see what the inner workings of the DNC were. And they had covered all their tracks, except for, apparently, there was a fingerprint that was left on the window, or the windowsill, I don't remember exactly, where they went back out the window. And when the police got that fingerprint, they worked their way to and found that guy. And they told the guy, if you give up the guy who called the shots for you, we'll give you a reduced sentence. Otherwise, we're going to hit you with the maximum. And so they kept doing this all the way back up the food chain. And while this was going on, the FBI was doing the research and hunting them down. Richard Nixon kept saying, I have no knowledge. I am not involved in this. And ultimately, someone made a comment. It got really close to him. I think it was, can't remember who it was, but it was the next level down. They worked up several levels. The level they were at right then, if these guys flipped, basically it was over for Nixon. And one of the guys said, well, why don't you check the tapes? And the FBI was all, check the tapes? What are you talking about? Well, Nixon had installed in the Oval Office audio devices. He recorded everything that went on in the Oval Office. So everything they needed to convict him on was on those audio tapes. So they asked for that information. The president claimed executive privilege. I don't have to turn that over. The legislative branch, the House and the Senate, sent subpoenas to them, to the president to turn it over. He said, I will not. So then they went to the judicial branch and asked for a judicial ruling. The Supreme Court said, absolutely you have to turn those over.
And that's when he resigned.
Checks and balances, right? Legislative and judicial against the executive. The executive had to submit. He turned over the tapes. And then Barry Goldwater, who was the leading ranking Republican in the Senate, came over to President Nixon and said, in confidence, he said, President Nixon, you ought to know that the votes are there. They're going to impeach you in the House, and it's going to be ratified in the Senate. You have two choices. You can go quietly, resign, or you can subject the country to a full-blown impeachment and, first time ever that a president's been removed from office. So, I got to give credit to Nixon. He didn't drag the country through a full impeachment hearing, which would have been a total drama. He just said, I resign, I'm out of here. So that's probably the only decent thing he did out of that. He lied the rest of the time, as the tape showed. So,
Down as president right now.
So the job of the select committee on this, for the presidential campaign activities, was to determine and figure out, what illegal acts had been done, if there were any, and whether Nixon did or not have involvement in the actual scandal itself.
All the presidents have been in that.
The Iran-Contra Committee. Senate Select Committee on Secret Military Assistance to Iran and Nicaraguan Opposition, and the House Select Committee to investigate covert arms transactions with Iran. Pro-Reagan administration's used secret projects of 1. The covert sale of arms to Iran as an arms for hostages deal, and 2. Give military aid to Contra rebels in Nicaragua, which was funded by Iranian arms sales.
and by the way, your book does not give a decent explanation about what this whole thing was. I think I got to give you a couple missing pieces that will put this whole thing in context. Basically, what had happened is in the 1970s, the Shah of Iran, who had been allied with the United States, we've been working with him to help, root out terrorist elements in the Middle East. Well, the Muslims, the Persian Muslims in Iran, didn't like, they don't like anyone who's not of their faith, and they didn't like the Shah working with the West. And so they went in and took over our embassy. You guys may remember this, 444 days.
No, I wasn't born.
Well, you can still study history. They ransacked our embassy, and they held Marines and embassy people hostage for 444 days. And then they basically turned into a theocracy. Their government there is run by the Ayatollah Khomeini, and he calls all the shots in Iran. These are the guys we're trying to negotiate with today. Anyways, we had good relations with the Shah prior to him being kicked out of the country. And he had bought a lot of advanced weaponry from us, including the F-14 Tomcat. If you've ever seen Top Gun, the planes that Tom Cruise flies, they had those planes. But it's a very high-tech machinery. And after they kicked out the Shah and they said, we hate you, we didn't give them any more support for those F-14s and other stuff. And so someone, and in Beirut, they were taking American hostages. They were hijacking planes. And we had many U.S. hostages held in the Middle East. Well, Iran is a state sponsor of terror. They're the ones who called the shots for Hezbollah and Hamas and some of these others. And so some people in the Reagan administration said to the Ayatollah, if you can get our hostages freed, we will give you some parts for your F-14 Tomcats, and then will actually sell them to you, and then you give us the money, and then that money will be given to freedom fighters in Nicaragua who are trying to kick out the communists in charge there. I mean, it was this triangle thing. It was very complex. And so I guess what ended up happening was Oliver North, some of you may know him, he was a very decorated Vietnam vet. He was a colonel. He ended up being the go-to guy who brought the money to the freedom fighters against the Sandinistas in Nicaragua. And this all came before this big committee hearing. I mean, people, I actually watched it during the 1980s. It was high drama, very interesting political questioning and dialogue. If you guys are interested in this, I'd be happy to discuss this more with you, but a lot went on here. We learned a lot about the committee process.
Yeah.
Was it?
Learn more
Man, you
about
should
it.
listen to,
Dumb.
do you listen to Immortal Techniques?
And then
Immortal
there's joint
Technique.
and conference
No.
committees. These are composed of members from both houses. They're more investigative in nature and issue periodic reports to the House and the Senate. They also have joint economic committees. Before a bill may be sent to the president, each house must pass it in identical form. The conference committees assist in producing a compromise bill that both houses accept. So sometimes when a bill goes through both of the houses, there's certain changes that maybe one house may want to make that the other house doesn't want to do. So the joint committees are members of both houses, and they form a compromise in order to pass that bill.
Because it has to be the exact
It has to be the exact same thing.
same wording. Otherwise, you can't send it to the president for either signature or veto.
And that concludes section 2.
Wow.
Joey,
And you're going to do sections 3 and 4